with you, there's certain advantages to it from a military viewpoint. Since the 1950s, this kinetic bombardment system has been developed over the years and turned into a thing called rods from God. Found out that the shape of the material that you use is important. The density of it's important. Tungsten is a really good material. That's the same type of thing they use in light bulb filaments. That survives the high temperatures of reentry. Also, the shape of the device is important. Long rods go much deeper in the earth. In fact, deep penetrating rounds. Now, just because you can do a lot of damage without a bomb doesn't mean you can't put a bomb on it. And there have been, like Project Longshot, again, a 1960s program exploring the potential of using atomic bombs to start earthquakes. And then there are other programs called microfission and microfusion programs where you make atomic hand grenades. This uses what's called a Voitinko compressor. Nikolai Voitinko created a armor-piercing round in the 1960s by compressing a shock wave and shooting it through armor. And then he realized that he could start a very tiny atomic explosion that way. And that was also studied by the United States. So you can make atomic bombs really, really tiny, smaller than the suitcase-sized bombs they say are the smallest possible. In fact, there was a University of Pennsylvania study that I was involved with in graduate school looking at microfission and microfusion propulsion. Because the explosions are so tiny, you can put it into a cup, a large cup, and make a rocket out of it, a very capable rocket. In the current instance, we can make very narrow cones. They're like long rods. They're conical shape. They're about 2 meters long, about 300 millimeters in diameter at the base, coming to a point. And in the center of these, you can have like a 50 millimeter diameter fusion device using an aneutronic fusion, which produces no radiation, and a solid fuel rocket at the base. And so what happens, this thing can be released from orbit, and it hits the Earth, and it creates supercavitation in the rock. Now, what's supercavitation? There's been a declassification of a lot of programs by Russia, so we know a lot more about what's going on in Russia than we do the U.S. at the present moment. But Russia developed the Squall torpedo. It's a torpedo that flies underwater faster than the speed of sound. And it does that by supercavitation. There's a small, they shape the nose of this rocket, of this underwater rocket, so that it pushes water aside and creates a cavity behind it. And the torpedo flies in this vacuum behind the water. The water is pushed aside and it doesn't collapse until it's well past the length of the rocket. So the rocket can fly underwater faster than the speed of sound. And this is old technology. Yes. We've known since the 1980s that you could do the same with rock. If you hit rock really, really hard, it turns into a plasma. And if you shape your nose on the thing that you're hitting it with, the nose will erode, but not before it pushes the rock aside, and the whole thing can move quite a distance underground. And so this rods from God, the declassified stuff, is sort of, I think, a psyop, because the supercavitation of rock is really where you want to be. The interesting thing about this is it doesn't leave a hole because it melts the rock, and the rock flows back together almost instantly. And so this idea that you could cause an earthquake from orbit with an earthquake gun or something like that is possible. Okay, the way it works is you have a cone of tungsten with a solid fuel rocket in it and a small aneutronic, like lithium deuteride, fusion device set off by a Voitinko compressor igniter, and you fly over the spot, deorbit, and you have a guidance system that guides you to a particular spot. When you hit the Earth, it just goes right into the Earth, and you can fly 10 to 20 kilometers underground and set off an explosion. Now, this can work in conjunction with HARP. Anybody who's put an egg in a microwave knows that you can explode an egg with microwave energy. So you can focus microwave energy with a phased array unit using the ionosphere as a mirror. You can focus energy underground. Well, you can do many things. You can communicate with submarines underwater. You can do radar, ground-penetrating radar to find things underground, and you can then focus energy to spots underground to cause an explosion underground of steam. You basically heat water up very quickly, and you have an explosion of steam. The amount of energy you can get from that is limited, but one of the things you want to do if you have a missile system is you want to have closed-loop command and control. And so you fly this thing. When it goes underground, you lose contact with it typically, but not if you have HARP. Because with HARP, you can map underground where you want to go, and then you can give guidance signals to the vehicle. So these things could work together like this. I don't know that they work together like this. It just seems reasonable to me that they do. And so, yes, you could have a vehicle in orbit that is flying overhead, and then within minutes can cause an earthquake anywhere within a 200-kilometer radius of that spot, as deep as 20 kilometers. It's well within our technical capacity to do that. I mean, it's not unreasonable. There's nothing bizarre, and in fact, you can point to programs that lead to it going back to the 50s. So that's interesting. Now, one of the most interesting things that I've heard recently in this regard, these are just thoughts that you have. You have no, I have some technical knowledge, and these things seem reasonable. I have no knowledge that these things are actually going on. However, when things come up, like, for example, on August 12th, I want to get the names right here, there was a orbital maneuvering vehicle. It's called the Minotaur 4. Well, that was the launch vehicle. It was a out of Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. It's the HTV-2B, which is the replacement for the X-37B. It's a hypersonic vehicle that can fly in the atmosphere long distances as well as orbit the Earth. So this is a hypersonic transfer vehicle. It's actually very similar to what's called the Sanger bomber proposed by Germany in World War II by Eugene Sanger. Basically, you orbit the Earth, but then you can skip off the atmosphere to do precise bombing runs and then skip back out into orbit. And so this sort of vehicle is a continuation of that sort of idea. But this thing was launched and then lost, which is unheard of in the modern world. I mean, we can read newspapers from orbit. There's no reason that we need to lose anything. Something might break up, and we would give a report like, "Oh, we found pieces of it floating in the ocean," right? But you don't say they're just lost. I don't understand how that could happen. So when that sort of piqued my interest. Now, this HTV-2B vehicle is a replacement for the X-37. It will be a much superior vehicle. It not only stays in one orbit, it can change its orbit using atmospheric lift. So skipping in and out of the atmosphere. So it has a lot more capability. But it was lost. Now, 12 days later, there were 2 earthquakes in deep underground military bases operated by the United States. Now, Benjamin Fulford said that the Pentagon is working with the Chinese to keep the world from being depopulated. So this is consistent. And, of course, the GRU, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Unit, their analysis shows from earthquake seismic data and from sound data picked up from a variety of broadcasts in the U.S., they said this is definitely an attack against an underground military base. It's not. And so the big question is, how can the atomic bomb get to the underground military base? And one answer might be through these rods from God weapons, where no military base, no matter how deeply it's placed in the earth, is immune from attack. And this, if this happened, this is a huge shift in power. On This was all in August. On 9/11, I happened to see the 9/11 coverage, or some of it, here in New Zealand, and they had a picture of George Bush standing next to Barack Obama during the 9/11 ceremonies this year, and he looked like a close friend had died or something like that. I mean, you've seen him through 8 years of the war on terror, not taking anything very seriously and just being a prick, and then all of a sudden he looks like he's like totally devastated, and you wonder what happened to him. Did his underground military base get destroyed? Who knows? That's what went through my head. Of course, from a scientific viewpoint, this is all hearsay. The only thing I can say is that as an engineer, I can see how these things can work together to create these sort of capabilities. And what has happened? We lose a orbital bombardment system, and 12 days later, we get 2 underground military bases. Get 2 explosions at underground military bases that look like earthquakes. That's a very interesting sort of thing. I think also, I don't have it in front of me here, but there was also a launch of a Long March rocket prior to those earthquakes. So did they pick up the Minotaur 4 in conjunction with some rogue elements in the United States Pentagon? Did they put it on top of a Long March rocket and put it in orbit and set off those weapons? Who knows? That's a scenario that's consistent with what we know, and it's consistent with technically what we can do.
And that is interesting because since then, and there's been reports of an underground base at the Gulf of Aden, and one in China. Now, varying reports say that these bases were a frequency was let go from these bases, one aimed at the Middle East and the other at China, both with different reasons. The one at the Middle East was, to wind these people up, to keep them angry, and the one at China to keep them dumbed down. So fascinating that this is going on, and when you do line up the Google Maps with where these bases are reported to be, they line up perfectly. So.
Well, there are I forget the gentleman. There was a group of people in Washington talking about psychotronic weapons and entrainment to certain frequencies, like the brain, training the brain. This is the basis of hypnosis. You have a watch that's swinging at a certain rate, and it tends to activate an entrainment process. And this can happen with sounds. This can happen with flashes of light, and it can happen with microwaves. And so the idea that you have psychotronic warfare, I think we're engaged in World War III right now, and I think because of the nature of modern science, it's secret war, and there are a lot of things going on that people would find incredible, but the details of that we won't know until after the war's long over.
Understood.
They'll just announce the results. The thing that I think people have to do is to understand that what they think might not be true. How they feel may be manipulated by others, and they have to draw a line and say, what do I want to be as a person? How do I want to live my life? And those sorts of things. You have to discover within yourself. This is a great opportunity for everyone as well. You have to discover within yourself where your limits are and what you're going to do about it, and not be driven by passion invoked by clever advertising, psychotronic manipulation, and all these other things. Those, I've been, just by the way, in New Zealand here, I won't say who, but a next-door neighbor, you get to know all your neighbors. My next-door neighbor, uncharacteristically, got very angry at his wife the other day. And then someone else at a restaurant got very angry at someone. And I was feeling sort of upset. I don't know why, but I meditate. So I sort of can separate, how I'm feeling from how I'm acting. So, but and I was feeling upset, and I was wondering why, and I'm wondering, is there some sort of psychotronic, deal going on that's emitting something to get everyone pissed off? Because
Absolutely.
that's the one thing that would hurt New Zealand more than anything if people forget that they're part of a community and to trust one another. So I can imagine that would call forth some sort of psychotronic attack that would level the playing field, so to speak, in the terms of the attackers against countries that don't have this strength. So,
well,
but
agreed with that, William. I've said it here before, but before and during the quakes, and I say quakes because we have had several, we were witnessing this ourselves. We had a couple of guys come here and smash tens of seals to their death. We had children in our town suddenly warring in the streets, with out-of-towners. It was just excruciating to watch. I watched my neighbours screaming at one another. These are people that are very gentle people.
Right.
It wasn't just the one across the road, it was the one next door. I found myself battling emotions as well. So, we know, and you've only got to look at the sky to see what's going on. But certainly we're having frequencies fired at us left, right and centre. And, even and at one of these points, where people were very stressed out and strung out in our community here, our mayor sent a very pointed letter to the government about the geoengineering and the trails, and he was not happy. The wording in the letter was very, very extreme, and that just happened to coincide with all this violence going on in our towns. So yeah, it's extremely interesting to watch, even more so to experience.
Yeah. There was a 1997 movie called Conspiracy Theory. I don't know if you remember that, but it had Julia Roberts and Mel Gibson in it. And at the end of the movie, they talked about the space shuttle being over Turkey during an earthquake. And there was an earthquake during a space shuttle flight in 1999. So, if those who are into conspiracy theories, that movie, I think, talks a little bit about it. And I think movies like this, Alex Constantine and again Alan Watt talk about the media and how important the media is to ruling oligarchy and how they're manipulated. And one of the things, you put ideas out there, but then you put them in a psychological context that they don't have any power. So these things sound very unusual, but from my technical knowledge, I think that they're perfectly doable. And given the history going back to the 50s in terms of weather control, earthquake, using nuclear weapons to initiate earthquakes and things like that, have a clear history. So even though it's secret and we don't really know about it yet, these things are not bizarre. I mean, they sound bizarre. In fact, they're made so to sound bizarre in the media, and but they're not. And so, but any type of psychotronic weapon cannot make a self-aware person do something they don't want to do if they're aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to step back and draw your line and say, you know what, I'm not going to scream at my wife. I'm not going to get angry at this person, I'm not going to be depressed, but that takes a little bit of self-awareness. And, people who do that, offer that sort of training and stuff are also marginalized, you might notice. Mm. So.
I agree with you there. Now that I'm aware that these things can and are happening around us, it is much, much easier to take a hold. And, just we need to get that out there to people that, your minds are being messed with, but you can be in control of yourself. It's a little bit harder, but if you know what's going on, then just don't let them beat you.
Well, if people have adequate food and water, raw materials and energy, and they have control of their money, there really is no way that anyone can exercise control over you. And so those are from a technical viewpoint, from somebody who wants to create a business opportunity or some technical nerd out there who wants to solve problems, those are the problems.
Yes. Yeah.